They said time heals all wounds. But what if time only deepens them? Tonight's story is about a breathtaking violinist named Olivier, whose haunting melody on a crowded street reignites a love long buried and a truth long hidden. 15 years ago, a tragic shipwreck stole her family, and a cruel betrayal tore her from Farron, the only man she ever loved. But when fate brings them face to face again, secrets unravel, lies, sabotage, and a family's dark past that nearly destroyed them both. What would you do if the person you lost everything for stood right in front of you again? Would you run or fight for a second chance? This is a story of music, love, and redemption, woven together by a melody she never forgot. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe and share this story with someone who believes love deserves one more chance. You'll want to stay until the end, because the final note changes everything. The city hummed with the pulse of late afternoon, a blur of horns, hurried heels, and voices blending into concrete chaos. But beneath the din, a sound rose and sliced through the noise like a memory surfacing from deep water. The aching cry of a violin. It came from the corner of a busy plaza, near the old fountain, where sunbeams bounced off glass towers and shadows stretched long across the pavement. People slowed, some turned, some even stopped mid-call, mid-conversation, mid-step. The music seemed too pure to exist amid metal and smoke. It curled around ankles, drifted up spines, and stilled hearts. And at the center of it all sat a woman, back straight, bow gliding like silk across strings. Her eyes closed as if the world behind her eyelids was the only one that mattered. Olivier Hart had played that song 1,000 times in her mind, but never in front of a crowd. Never since the day everything collapsed. The notes trembled, soared, then wept as they left her fingertips, and each one was a piece of her heart set free. Her golden hair flowed past her shoulders, catching light like spun honey. And though her clothes were modest, her presence drew eyes the way moonlight pulls the tide. She didn't notice them. She couldn't. Her mind was elsewhere, far away 15 years back, on a dock shrouded in fog, on a ship that never made it home, on a goodbye she had never wanted to say. Every stroke of the bow was a wound opened, a scar sung to life. She played not for coins or praise, but because if she didn't, she'd drown in the silence. Across the street, stepping out of a sleek black car, Farron Blake froze. His phone slipped slightly in his hand as the melody stopped him mid-step. That song. It wasn't just familiar, it was theirs. The same melody Olivier had composed when they were 17. The one she used to play while lying barefoot in his lap on the campus lawn, their futures bright and wide open. For a second, he wondered if he was hallucinating. It had been a brutal morning, board meetings, merger threats, and a press leak that threatened everything he'd built. But that sound, it yanked him out of the boardroom and threw him into a memory. A girl with wild laughter, a stubborn spirit, and music in her veins. A girl who once loved him with a fierceness that terrified and anchored him at once. And then disappeared. He moved closer, weaving through the frozen crowd as the final note faded into the breeze. The woman opened her eyes, and the world tipped sideways. It was her, Olivier. Older, yes, thinner, paler, but the same, unmistakably the same. Her face hit him like sunlight through a storm, familiar and foreign all at once. Farron's breath caught as he took a step forward, then stopped, unsure whether to speak, afraid that if he did, the moment would shatter. She gathered her case with practiced hands, bow already tucked away. Her gaze drifted across the plaza, sweeping past him for a second, then snapped back. Their eyes locked, shock flashed across her face like lightning. Her body stiffened. Her fingers clenched the violin case tightly. And then, without a word, without a second's hesitation, She turned and walked swiftly in the opposite direction. Farron reacted instinctively. "Olivian!" he called, stepping off the curb, ignoring the honking car and the businessman who swore at him. "Wait!" She didn't. She crossed the street, slipped between two vendors, and disappeared into the crowd like mist evaporating in sunlight. He broke into a jog, scanning heads and shoulders, weaving through tourists and pigeons, and a woman pushing a stroller. His heart pounded, not just from exertion, but disbelief. She was alive. She was here. After 15 years of silence, of grief, of thinking she had vanished by choice or by tragedy, she had been playing music 3 blocks from his office. He reached the edge of the plaza and looked left, right, spinning. Nothing. Just a blur of motion and color and noise. He stood still for a long time, the weight of her absence pressing down harder than it had in years. He remembered the last time he saw her, standing at the edge of the harbor with tears in her eyes, telling him in a voice so cold it didn't belong to her that she didn't love him anymore, that he wasn't enough, that she had someone else waiting. He remembered her turning away. He remembered the months that followed, how he drank too much, worked too late, shut down every time someone said her name. He remembered the funeral 2 days later, the charred remains of the ship she was supposed to be on, and the report confirming her parents' deaths. But nobody. No trace of her. "Sir, are you all right?" a woman asked as she passed. He nodded absently. But no, he wasn't all right, because she had looked at him like he was a ghost, like she was the one haunted. Later that evening, as he sat in his penthouse with the lights off and the city flickering beneath his window, Farron poured a drink he didn't want and stared at the untouched violin case he had kept all these years, the one she left behind. In the same case, he couldn't bring himself to open. "She's here," he whispered to himself. "And something's wrong." He could feel it in the way she ran, in the way her eyes widened in panic instead of joy. This wasn't just an awkward reunion. This wasn't unfinished business. It was fear, guilt, maybe even danger. He didn't know what had happened to her after she left him, but one thing was suddenly and painfully clear. Someone hadn't wanted her in his life. Someone had made sure she vanished, and he intended to find out who. Farron reached for his phone, scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in over a year, and hit dial. "Marcus," he said as soon as the line picked up. "I need you to find someone." "Who?" "Olivian Hart." There was a pause on the other end. "I thought she died in the shipwreck." "So did I." Farron leaned back, eyes fixed on the night. "But she's very much alive, and I think someone's gone to great lengths to make sure I never knew that." It was nearly midnight when the black sedan pulled into the alley behind the tiny bar on Westbridge. The sign above the door flickered weakly, half the letters burnt out, and the music inside was more moan than melody. Farron waited in the car, hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary, watching through the windshield as the last of the crowd trickled out. He had been sitting there for over an hour. Marcus's tip had been accurate. Olivian had a standing arrangement to play there on Thursdays for cash and cheap wine. It wasn't the kind of place she belonged in, but then again, nothing about this felt right. She emerged at last, violin case slung over her shoulder, scarf pulled high against the cold. Her posture was different from what it used to be, straighter in some ways, wearier in others. But her face, when she glanced toward the street lamp, was unmistakable. Farron stepped out quietly and met her halfway down the sidewalk. "You play even better than you used to," he said, his voice low and steady. She froze mid-step, her eyes locked on his, like prey caught in a trap. "Farron," she breathed, the name slicing the air between them. "Don't," she added quickly, turning away, her pace quickening. But he followed. "I just want to talk, Liv. 5 minutes. You owe me that much." She spun around so fast that the strap on her case jerked. I don't owe you anything, she hissed, her voice breaking like glass. I told you everything I needed to say 15 years ago. No, you told me what you were forced to say, Farron shot back, stepping closer. You said you didn't love me, that you found someone else, that I was never enough. But your eyes said otherwise, and I was too young and too stupid to question it. Olivianne laughed bitterly, one hand tightening around the strap on her case. That's the problem, Farron. You were stupid. You believed every word without once wondering why it didn't make sense. You were supposed to know me. I did, he said, voice low now. I still do. She turned to leave again, but he gently caught her arm, not to stop her, only to steady the spinning world around them. I saw your eyes yesterday. You ran like I was a threat. What are you so afraid of? She looked down, then finally back at him, her features tight. I'm afraid of everything you remind me of. I'm afraid of the pain I buried. I'm afraid of what you'll dig up. Farron stepped back, giving her space. Someone made you disappear, Liv. I don't know how or why, but I'm going to find out. And if you didn't leave me because you wanted to, you don't know what you're saying, she cut in. Yes, I do, he said. I talked to my father today. That stopped her, her face drained of color. You, what? Farron nodded slowly. He denied everything, of course. But I know when he's lying. And he's hiding something. Something about you. About that ship. About your parents. Olivianne's hand flew to her chest, as if to press something back inside. You shouldn't be doing this. You don't understand what you're getting into. Then explain it to me, he said, stepping in again, not threatening, just searching. Tell me what happened. Why did you leave like that? Why the lies, the silence? She looked away, lips trembling. Because if I didn't say those things, they said you'd die. That was the choice, Farron. Break your heart, or watch them destroy you. Her words hung between them, thick and heavy. Who are they? He asked, though part of him already knew. Your father, his associates, the people your family did business with. I don't even know all their names, but they came to me after the ship incident, said if I didn't disappear, you'd be next. Farron's stomach twisted, his blood going cold. That was never a random accident, was it? She shook her head. It was a warning. My father had discovered something. Paper trails, bank records, shell companies. He was going to go public. Then the boat exploded. My parents died and I... She broke off, the memory still raw. They told me if I vanished, they'd leave you alone. I didn't have a choice. Silence fell again, broken only by a gust of wind rattling trash against the alley wall. Farron stared at her, barely breathing. You've been carrying this alone all these years? She nodded. I couldn't risk coming back. I've lived in 12 cities, changed my name 3 times. I only came back recently because I ran out of places to run to. And all this time, he whispered, I thought you betrayed me. I hated you for so long. I know, she said softly. And I let you, because it meant you were alive. He stepped forward and took her hand gently. That's over now. You're not alone anymore. I don't care what they said or did. I'm not letting them keep us apart again. She looked down at their joined hands, then slowly pulled away. It's not that simple. You have a life now, power, a name to protect. If they come for you again, then let them, Farron said fiercely. I've lived 15 years with the wrong version of you in my mind. I won't waste another second pretending any of that was the truth. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Olivianne's eyes welled with tears. You don't know what loving me costs. Then teach me, he replied. I'm not afraid of the price, but I am afraid of losing you again. She swallowed hard and looked away, wiping at her eyes. You'll regret this, Farron. You always regret the things you chase too hard. Not this time, he said. She hesitated, then turned and began walking away. Not fast, not running, just moving forward with the weight of the world still on her shoulders. Farron didn't follow, not yet. He just watched her go, heart pounding, mind racing. This wasn't over. It had never truly ended. And now that he knew the truth was out there, he would stop at nothing to uncover the rest. He pulled out his phone again. "Marcus," he said as the call connected. "I need everything. Records, names, financial trails, anything tied to my father's deals 15 years ago." "That's going to get dangerous, sir," Marcus replied. "It already is," Farron said quietly. "But this time, I'm not the boy who got left behind. I'm the man who's going to bring the truth to light." Farron didn't sleep that night. He paced the marble floors of his penthouse, the city glittering coldly beneath the windows, while memories collided with fragments of newly discovered truth. The silence of the room only made Olivian's words louder in his mind. They said you'd die. That was the choice. He had lived with the bitterness of her abandonment for 15 years, building a legacy out of spite and ambition, trying to forget the girl with the violin and the eyes that once held his entire world. But now, the betrayal he had always believed in had shifted, revealing itself as something else entirely, something far more sinister. And he couldn't look away anymore. By dawn, Marcus had sent the first report. Farron sat at his desk, ignoring the untouched coffee, as file after file loaded onto his screen. Some were old newspaper articles, reports about the shipwreck that took the lives of Thomas and Elira Hart, declared a mechanical failure caused by unforeseen pressure buildup. But now, 15 years later, Marcus had found anomalies, testimonies quietly retracted, investigators replaced, and one key eyewitness who had disappeared within days of the inquiry. Then came the financial records, hidden transfers, offshore accounts, and one shell corporation that led directly back to Everett Blake, Farron's father. There it was, laid out in numbers and dates. Everett's company had funneled large sums of money through a network of false charities. One of those charities, it turned out, had once employed Thomas Hart, Olivian's father, as a financial consultant. According to buried audit reports, Thomas had discovered the fraud and threatened to report it to the authorities. The next day, the Hart family boarded that ship, and the next morning, the world believed they had simply died in a tragic accident. Farron pushed his chair back, his jaw tight, his heart a drumbeat of fury. This wasn't corporate maneuvering. This was criminal. And now he understood why Olivian had looked at him with that haunted stare, why she had said, "You don't know what loving me costs." Her silence had been purchased with fear, but her pain had never been erased. And what stung most of all was how easily he had believed the worst of her. "She told me she met someone else," he thought bitterly, "but it was my father holding the gun to her dreams." Without hesitating, he grabbed his phone and dialed the one number he had sworn never to use again unless necessary. The line rang twice before the familiar gravel voice answered. "Farron, it's early." "We need to talk," Farron said, already slipping on his coat. "It's about the Harts, about what happened to Olivian's family." There was a pause. Then Everett said calmly, "I'll meet you at the house, 30 minutes. Farron didn't say another word. He ended the call and slammed the door behind him. The Blake estate sat at the edge of the cliffs overlooking the sea, an architectural statement of dominance and lineage. But this morning, as Farron stepped through its iron gates and walked past the pristine hedges and silent fountains, it felt like a mausoleum. He entered through the side corridor, bypassing the butler, heading straight for his father's private study. Everett was already there, sipping scotch at 8 in the morning, wearing a tailored robe and the same bored expression he always reserved for moral discussions. "You've been busy," Everett said, not looking up, "digging through graves that should have stayed buried." Farron closed the door behind him, his voice cold. So it's true. You knew what happened to the Harts. You knew what they were planning to expose, and you let them die. Everett raised an eyebrow. Watch your tone. Don't deflect, Farron snapped, stepping closer. I have proof. I know about the payments, the fake charities. I know Thomas Hart threatened to go public. And I know he was silenced. Everett sighed, setting his glass down slowly. Do you have any idea what was at stake back then? We were in the middle of international expansion. One scandal would have dismantled the entire empire. I did what was necessary. Necessary? Farron said, the word catching in his throat like poison. You destroyed an entire family. Everett stood now, calm but commanding. They were a risk, a very dangerous one. Thomas wouldn't back down, and that ship was already a liability. There were whispers of sabotage from other investors, and yes, perhaps someone took advantage of the moment. But don't pretend you understand the weight of legacy, Farron. You were a boy. I loved her, Farron said, his voice hoarse. And you tore her from me. You let me believe she betrayed me, that she stole from me, that she just walked away. Everett didn't flinch. It was cleaner that way. If you hated her, you would move on. You were destined for greater things. Farron stepped forward, fury barely restrained. You forged letters. You drained our savings account and pinned it on her family. You sent her away with lies and threats. And now you want to talk about destiny? Everett walked to the window, his voice softer now. If she had stayed, they would have killed you too. The people we were dealing with back then weren't negotiators. I gave her a choice and she made the right one. Farron's fists clenched. You gave her no choice. You took away everything. Everett turned to face him, and for once, there was something almost human in his eyes. Fatigue. Maybe even guilt, though it vanished quickly. You have no idea how fragile power is until it's slipping from your hands. Farron looked at the man he had admired, feared, and tried so long to please. And for the first time, he felt nothing but disgust. You taught me to win at any cost, but this wasn't winning, this was slaughter. As he turned to leave, Everett called after him. What are you going to do? Ruin yourself to rewrite history? Farron paused at the door. No, I'm going to tell the truth, even if it ruins everything you built. He left without waiting for a reply, the chill of the hallway biting at his spine. In the car, he sat still for a long time before calling Marcus again. We're going public, not just the fraud, the entire story. The Hart tragedy, the forged evidence, the cover-up, everything. You sure? Marcus asked. This will torch your reputation. Your father will come after you. Farron looked out toward the horizon, remembering the sound of Olivia's violin, the way her voice trembled when she said she had no choice. I'm sure. It's time someone did the right thing. And as the car pulled away from the mansion, Farron knew the next move wouldn't be about business, or vengeance, or legacy. It would be about redemption. For her, for him, and for every truth buried beneath 15 years of carefully constructed lies. Farron stood outside the bar's back entrance once again, leaning against the cold brick wall, as if it could hold him upright. The weight of the truth he'd uncovered pressed hard against his ribs, but it was the image of Olivia's face, tight with pain, lit by heartbreak, that truly hollowed him. After leaving his father's estate, he hadn't gone home, hadn't slept, hadn't spoken to anyone except Marcus, whom he had instructed to prepare the documents for public release. But first, before any exposure or revenge, before any righteous justice, he needed to see her. Not as a CEO reclaiming a narrative, but as a man who had finally seen the wound he helped carry, and now stood trembling before the woman still bleeding from it. It was nearly closing time when she emerged from the back door, bundled in a thin coat, violin strapped across her back. She stopped mid-step when she saw him, her jaw tensing, but she didn't turn away this time. He walked toward her slowly, as if afraid she might disappear again. "I went to see my father," he said, his voice low but steady. "He admitted it, Liv. The fake charity, the threats, the payoff to make you disappear. It was all real. He even confirmed that the ship was sabotaged, though he swears it wasn't by his hand. But he knew, and he let it happen." Olivianne didn't speak, though her hands trembled where they clutched the edges of her coat. She stood there in the alleyway, the hum of the city behind them, her face pale beneath the streetlight's glow. Farron took another step forward. "I'm sorry. I believed him. I believed everything they told me about you. That you ran for money, that you used me, and I let that belief poison me for 15 years. Her eyes flickered, not with forgiveness, but with the weariness of someone who has carried silence too long. "You were supposed to know me better," she said quietly. "You were supposed to fight for me." "I didn't know how," he admitted, the confession scraping out of him like glass. "I was angry, broken, and too proud to question the story they gave me. But I know now, and I'm not going to let this be the end." She looked away, her shoulders tense, as if bracing herself for another impact. He reached into his coat pocket, then slowly extended his hand. In his palm lay a small, heart-shaped pendant on a delicate silver chain, the necklace he had given her for her 16th birthday, the one he had never seen again after she vanished. "I found this," he said, his voice almost breaking. "You dropped it the night you collapsed at the bar. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't know if I deserved to ask what it meant, but now I think I do." Olivianne stared at it, her breath catching slightly, then looked up at him. "I wore it every day," she whispered, her fingers curling into fists. "Even when I was starving, even when I thought I hated you, I wore it because some part of me couldn't let go of who we were." Farron stepped closer, holding the necklace like it might anchor them both. "That part of you saved me, because when I saw it, I remembered the girl who used to fall asleep with her head on my shoulder and her hand on that chain, like it tethered her to something safe. It did," she said, her voice cracking. "It tethered me to hope, and it hurt like hell every time I remembered that you never came after me." "I'm here now," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "And I'm not leaving unless you tell me to walk away." There was a long, aching silence between them, filled with all the things they had never said and all the years that had been stolen. Olivianne looked down at the necklace, then reached out, her fingers brushing his palm as she took it from him. "I don't know what this means anymore," she said, her tone trembling with something between fear and longing. "I don't even know who I am without all the running and hiding," Farron nodded. "Then let's figure it out together. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking for a chance to build something honest despite it." She turned away, walking a few steps into the alley, then stopped, her back to him. "You want to fix everything," she said quietly. "But I'm not sure I'm ready to be fixed. I'm still angry. I still wake up in the middle of the night wondering what I could have done differently. I still look in the mirror and see a girl who failed to save her parents, who failed to stand up to monsters in silk suits." "You didn't fail," he said firmly. "They made you believe you were powerless, but surviving what you did, that's not weakness, that's strength." She turned back to face him, and for the first time that night, her eyes softened, just slightly. "Do you believe that?" "I believe in you," he said. "I always did. I just forgot for a while. But I remember now." She stepped closer, her hands still clutching the necklace, and looked up at him with eyes full of tears. "This doesn't mean I forgive your family. It doesn't mean I'm ready to be anything more than what I am right now. I don't want you to be anything but yourself," he replied. "If all we have is today, I'll take it." They stood there, two souls cracked and reassembled, as the city moved on around them. And in that quiet, unremarkable alley, something fragile and rare passed between them. Not resolution, not certainty, but the beginnings of healing. Olivianne looked at the necklace one last time, then slowly reached behind her neck and fastened it. "You still talk too much," she said, a small, broken smile curving her lips. "And you still look like the boy who gave me this, even though your eyes carry a lot more weight now." Farron chuckled softly. "I think I'll always be that boy when it comes to you." She took a deep breath and nodded toward the street. "Come on. I have half a bottle of wine and a playlist that needs judging. If you're lucky, I might let you hear something new I've been working on." "Only if you promise to roast my taste in music back," he said, falling into step beside her. "That's the only kind of honesty I can handle right now." And as they walked away from the alley, no grand promises were made. No dramatic music played, but something had shifted. A wall had cracked, a truth had been spoken, and a melody that had once ended in silence now found a note of hope lingering on the air. For a fleeting while, it almost felt like the world had stopped spinning against them. In the weeks that followed their fragile reunion, Olivianne and Farron settled into a strange rhythm, one not defined by certainty, but by the quiet bravery of showing up each day. She continued to play at the bar while Farron would wait at the same corner table, never intruding, never demanding more than she could give. Their conversations unfolded slowly, often over old jazz records or long walks after closing time, laced with music, memory, and the tentative hum of something beginning to heal. It wasn't a love rekindled. It was something different, rawer, shaped by age and scars and all the things that had been stolen from them. But just as the silence began to soften between them, a storm they never saw coming gathered beyond the horizon. It started with a headline: Blake Industries and Hart Foundation to host global symposium. Beneath it, a photo of Farron smiling at a press conference with another woman, Sabrina Cresswell, heiress to a banking empire and long rumored to be the match Everett Blake had spent years arranging. The article spoke glowingly of a strategic alliance and hinted boldly at an imminent engagement, cementing two legacies into one unstoppable future. Olivianne saw it in a client's newspaper, right before her set. Her hands froze mid-tune, the violin bow hanging in the air like betrayal suspended in time. She didn't wait for the show to end. By the time Farron got to the bar, she was gone. When he found her 2 hours later in her tiny apartment, her suitcase half-packed and her fingers trembling as she folded old sweaters into neat, angry piles, he felt something inside him rupture. "Liv, listen to me. I didn't know they were going to release that," he said, breathless, stepping into the room she hadn't invited him into. "It's not true. I didn't agree to anything." She didn't look at him as she zipped the bag shut, her voice low but fierce. "You didn't say no either." "I was going to handle it privately." "There's no such thing as private when you're a Blake," she snapped, her eyes finally rising to meet his. "You of all people should know that. And don't insult me by pretending you didn't see this coming." Farron ran his hand through his hair, his jaw tight with frustration. "I've been trying to fix everything behind the scenes, to unravel what my father did, to protect the board, to keep the company from collapsing before I could set things right. I thought if I could just buy time, we'd be safe." "Safe?" Olivianne repeated, laughter catching in her throat like glass. "You're playing chess with people who rigged the board from the start. There is no safe, Farron. There never was." He stepped toward her, his voice desperate now. "I don't want her. I want you. I never stopped wanting you." "Then why didn't you tell them?" she asked, her voice soft but cutting. "Why didn't you stand on that stage and say it? To your father, to the board, to the damn world?" He faltered, and that momentary silence between them said more than any apology could. Because she was right. He hadn't said it. Not when it mattered. Olivia turned back to her suitcase, her fingers now folding the old hoodie he used to wear in college, the one she had kept hidden all these years like a relic. "I was foolish to think we could undo what was done," she whispered. "That some late-night wine and a few shared songs could wipe out a decade of silence and manipulation." "It wasn't foolish," he said, his voice hollow. "It was real." "Then you should have fought for it," she said, lifting the suitcase. "Because now, I have to fight for myself." As she moved past him, Farron reached out and grabbed her wrist, not roughly, but with a pleading grip that made her freeze. "Please don't go," he said, his voice raw. "Not like this. Not again." "Then do something different," she replied. "Say something different." But he couldn't. Not then. Not with the weight of boardrooms and bloodlines still choking the back of his throat. So she pulled away, stepped into the hallway, and this time, he didn't chase her. The days that followed blurred into headlines and handshakes. Farron officially ended his father's engagement plans, returned every call from Sabrina's PR team with silence, and refused to play the role Everett had written for him. But it came at a cost. Stocks dropped, investors panicked, and the Blake boardroom became a battlefield. Still, Farron didn't care. All he saw when he closed his eyes was a woman in a long coat walking down a narrow street, disappearing into a world that didn't deserve her. Then, one night, he found her again, by accident, or maybe fate. She was playing in a small cafe on the other side of town, a place hidden behind vines and amber windows, and her music poured into the street like a secret. He stood outside for a long time before walking in, not as a CEO or a man seeking redemption, but simply as someone who had finally understood what he was willing to risk for love. When she saw him, she didn't stop playing, but her fingers trembled for a single beat. And when she finished, and the room erupted in quiet applause, he stepped forward, not with promises, but with truth. "I canceled the engagement," he said, his voice steady as the room fell silent. "I lost half my board and most of our market share. I'm being sued by 3 different investors, and my father hasn't spoken to me since. But I don't care, because none of it means anything if I don't have you." Olivia stood there, her violin still at her side, her expression unreadable. "You're a fool," she said, but there was no venom in her voice. "A stubborn, reckless, foolish man." He smiled, the first real one in days. "Then I'm yours, if you'll still have me." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either. And sometimes, in a world that demands too much, staying is the bravest thing of all. The concert hall shimmered with anticipation, its vaulted ceiling catching the light like a cathedral of secrets waiting to be confessed. Every seat was filled, not just with the city's elite, but with eyes that had judged, whispered, or invested in the carefully crafted legacy of the Blake name. The charity gala had been billed as a night of musical elegance. What no one expected was that it would also become the stage for redemption, revelation, and reckoning. Backstage, Olivia adjusted the soft ivory sleeves of her gown, her fingers lingering near the necklace that still rested against her collarbone. The pendant pulsed like a heartbeat, faint, steady, and quietly defiant. She inhaled slowly, her reflection staring back at her from the mirror, not as a girl abandoned, but as a woman who had survived. Across the room, Farron watched her, his tailored suit pristine, his jaw tense, and his eyes holding the weight of the truth he was about to bear to the world. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked, though his voice betrayed more concern for her than for himself. "I've played for strangers all my life," she said, not looking at him. "But tonight I'm playing for the truth. That's all that matters." "You still take my breath away when you talk like that," he replied, with a ghost of a smile. "You always did." "Then breathe quieter," she said, though her lips twitched with something soft. "We have a show to give." The host's voice echoed from the stage, announcing Farron's name with all the pomp and polish of a man still believed to be untouchable. Applause rose like polite thunder, though a ripple of curiosity moved through the crowd. Whispers of scandal had already begun to spread, from Sabrina's abrupt departure from town to rumors of a hostile boardroom shakeup. Farron stepped into the light, his posture rigid but controlled, like a man prepared to tear off his armor. "Good evening," he began, his voice calm but unflinching. "Tonight was meant to celebrate legacy, and in a way it still does, but not the kind built on money, influence, or carefully buried lies. I'm here to talk about a different legacy, one I almost let slip away, one that cost a young woman everything while others drank champagne and smiled." The room fell utterly silent. He looked directly into the crowd, not searching for allies, but refusing to look away from the truth. 15 years ago, my family orchestrated a campaign to destroy someone I loved. They fabricated betrayal, silenced innocence, and, through inaction or design, allowed a tragedy that took 2 innocent lives. My silence made me complicit. My inaction made me weak. And I've spent every day since trying to pretend that strength meant control. But I was wrong. Strength is truth. And tonight that truth has a voice. With that, he stepped aside, and the spotlight shifted, casting a warm glow across the stage as Olivianne emerged. Her presence was ethereal yet grounded, like a symphony come to life. She didn't bow or smile. She simply lifted her violin, positioned the bow, and closed her eyes. What followed wasn't just music, it was memory carved into melody. The piece began with a hesitant hush, like footsteps retracing old roads. A soft theme whispered of innocence, of stolen kisses beneath summer trees and laughter on borrowed time. Then the tempo shifted, jagged, urgent, full of dissonance. It was the sound of betrayal, of letters unread and oceans crossed in silence, of a girl screaming into waves that swallowed everything. Her fingers danced with fury and grace, dragging the bow like a blade across string and soul. Farron watched from the wings, breath shallow as the room sat stunned. No one moved, no one dared. When the music softened again, it wasn't a return to the beginning, but a new language of scars. The final notes rose like dawn breaking, hesitant, but undefeated. And as the last vibration faded into stillness, the audience erupted, not in applause alone, but in a standing ovation, moved not by fame or status, but by something sacred. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Farron. He stepped forward slowly, took the mic once more, and said, "That piece was titled 15 Years. She wrote it the night I found her in a rain-soaked alley, trying to disappear again. But she didn't. She chose to play. She chose to speak. And I choose now to love her, not in secret, not with apology, but as the man I should have been then." He reached into his jacket, pulled out an old photo, faded at the edges, taken when they were 17, their arms wrapped around each other, smiles untouched by cruelty. "This is who we were before the lies, and this," he said, turning to face her fully, "is who I want to be again. Not for the world, for you." Olivianne didn't say a word, but her hands trembled as she stepped toward him. The necklace caught the light, the heart pendant glinting like defiance reclaimed. She stopped inches from him and whispered, not for the crowd, but for him alone, "You showed up late, Farron, but you came. That matters." He nodded, eyes stinging, and said, "So did you." The audience faded into silence again as they stood there, not kissing, not embracing, just holding each other's gaze like it was the most fragile, necessary thing in the world. The conductor stepped onto the stage, unsure of what to do. But then, the orchestra began to play softly, instinctively, as if recognizing the end of a movement, not written in notes, but in truth. And somewhere in the front row, a figure rose slowly. A man older now, gaunt and pale, with a cane and a solemn face. Everett Blake stood, not applauding, but watching the son who had refused to be him. His hands trembled, his legacy, cracked and falling. And as he turned to leave, he whispered something to no one in particular. Maybe love wins after all. 3 years later, the old city conservatory had been transformed. Once a forgotten hall of peeling walls and broken benches, it now stood tall as the Melodia Institute of Music and Healing, its white arches gleaming under the morning sun. Children of all backgrounds filed through the doors clutching violins, guitars, sheet music, and nervous hope. At the heart of it all stood Olivianne and Farron, no longer symbols of tragedy, but of triumph, standing hand in hand beneath a carved wooden plaque that read, "Where music heals what silence broke." The soft sound of strings drifted from a nearby classroom as Farron adjusted the strap of a violin case on a young girl's shoulder, smiling gently as she ran off toward her lesson. He turned back to Olivianne, who stood by the garden, her golden hair flowing in the breeze, her hand resting gently on her rounded stomach. The pregnancy had come as a quiet miracle, one they hadn't dared hope for. After everything that had been taken from her, her parents, her home, her voice, life had returned something she never expected to feel again: wholeness. The conservatory had opened with modest donations and an ambitious mission to create not only artists, but survivors. The curriculum combined classical music instruction with emotional resilience, offering therapy through melody. Olivianne taught a course called Strings of Memory, while Farron lectured on musical entrepreneurship. But it was the way they co-led the final composition recitals each season that had made the program famous. They didn't just rebuild a building, they rewrote the purpose of legacy. But despite all the joy, the scars hadn't fully faded. The city knew what Farron had done. He had stood on the concert stage 3 years ago and told the world the truth about the forged letters, the fake arrest records, and how his father's greed had destroyed a girl's life. The confession had cost him his name at boardrooms across the country. Contracts had vanished. Investors had turned cold. But to Olivianne, and to the hundreds who applied to Melodia every year, he was something far greater than a CEO. He was a man who chose truth over comfort. One evening, as the golden hour poured light through the tall, stained glass windows, Olivianne sat at the same antique piano where she had once played that haunting street melody. Farron approached from behind, watching the way her fingers moved, how effortlessly she breathed with each chord. "That's the piece you wrote back then, isn't it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, not stopping. "I called it Winter Without You, but today I started a new arrangement, a second movement. I'm naming it Spring, finally." Farron chuckled, his hand resting on her shoulder as the last note faded. "Fitting, since spring gave me you again." She looked up at him, eyes full of light, and for a long moment, there were no words, just the echo of forgiveness that had taken years to tune. Later that week, a letter arrived. It was from Vincent Hale, the new chairman of Hale Enterprises after Charles's passing. Farron's father had spent his final months in silence, battling a disease he had refused to treat. But in the last few days of his life, he had written a signed statement, acknowledging everything he had done to Olivianne, admitting the fabricated charges, the bribes, and the manipulation that led to the ship sabotage. Vincent offered to transfer the family estate's art collection and a portion of the inheritance to fund Melodia's expansion if they agreed to rename the new wing after Charles.